Well, if you are new to us, we are going through and have been going through the book of Acts. And so go ahead and get your Bibles out to the book of Acts. We've been here for several months. Last week, if you were here, I actually kind of slowed it down a little bit. The goal was to be done next week, I believe it was. And so we're going to have to extend it just a little bit. And hopefully that's okay with you. But I felt like God was leading us last week to just kind of slow down and cover a few things there about the Apostle Paul. And so we did that, which means that we'll still be talking about this in the weeks to come. We still have Christmas. We're going to pause for Christmas, New Year's, and then we'll be preaching wrapping up Acts. It should be the first Sunday in January. Then followed by that, we will start our new series on the book of Romans on January 12th. And I just hope that you will join us and be a part of this as we dig into God's Word together. We study it. We're kind of just working our way through these books, and I think hopefully we're all learning together and drawing closer to the Lord as we do it. As I mentioned, we kind of slowed down last week. We looked at Paul at one of these, what I would say is probably one of the lowest points of his life. He's also had a very special moment, if you remember last week, where in this moment of lowness, I don't know what I would call it, depression. We don't know that for sure, but I'm sure that Paul was needing some encouragement. And Jesus shows up, as he always does, right on time there in his prison, encourages him. And if you've been with us, you know that Paul's been through a whole lot through his life. He's been beaten. He's been left for dead. He has been hated and falsely accused. He's been in prison for long periods of time. And I think what makes it so hard is the fact that he didn't deserve any of it. Like some people, it's kind of like, okay, they have a rough life, but we look at him and go, but you know what? You made some bad decisions, and we understand why you're there. With Paul, it's not that way. He's done nothing wrong. The only reason they've done all these things to him is they don't like what he believes. They don't like what he teaches and preaches. They don't like that he believes Jesus is the Messiah. They definitely don't like the fact that he talks about this whole resurrection of the dead, that Jesus was resurrected from the dead, and so will we be one day. And so because of those things, he has really gone through some undeserved persecution. And so here in Acts 23, we have a commander who, if you've been with us, you know this guy. We're actually going to get to know his name today. But this Roman commander, he's been trying to figure out why the Jews hate Paul so much. He really can't wrap his mind around it either. He's like, what's this guy really done? I mean, why y'all hate him so much? Because you have to understand, they want to kill him. We're going to see that today. It's not just like, oh, we don't really like this guy a whole lot. We just want him to leave town. Or we would just like to beat him a little bit and let him go on his way. They want him dead. I mean, that's really their goal. And the commander can't get his mind wrapped around why the hate is so strong here. And as we saw last week, the commander brought him before this Jewish council called the Sanhedrin. And Paul speaks, and when he speaks about the resurrection again, they go nutso on each other, both the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Literally physical altercations ensue. And because it got so crazy, the commander has to step in, pull Paul away, take him back to the barracks. And it's the next evening when Jesus shows up there to visit with Paul and encourage him. And that's where we left off last week. So we're going to pick it up in chapter 23, verse 12 through 15. And this is what it says. The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petitioned the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." So there's this very zealous group of Jews. I think it's pretty clear they want to kill him, right? I mean, it's mentioned like 3 different times there. That's their goal. They hate him for what he preaches, teaches, and believes. And so they get there's more than 40 guys that get together and they're like, we're all in. We're going to make this happen. We're going to kill him. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to have you guys. So they get together with some of the Jewish leaders that are the shady ones for sure. And it's like, listen, here's the deal. You guys figure out a way to get the commander to bring Paul back before you. And by the way, when he's on his way to come see you guys, when we get him out of the barracks and he's on his way, we will basically just ambush them. We'll overtake the Roman guards that are there. There's more of us than them, and we're going to kill Paul before he ever gets to the Sanhedrin. And so it sounds like a good plan, except that someone obviously talked about this a little bit too much. We all know the saying, loose lips sink ships, right? And so apparently either somebody talked about it too much or they talked about it to the wrong people, because one of Paul's family members hears about this and it's going to foil their plan. Verse 16 says, "But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and he told Paul." So apparently Paul's nephew either overheard somebody talking about this, or somebody heard this, went to Paul's nephew, told him what was going on, and then he goes to tell Paul about it. Either way, he goes straight there to him. And by the way, this is the only mention of any of Paul's family in the whole New Testament. And so we get to learn here that Paul at least had a sister, had a nephew. We don't know how old the nephew is. We don't know. He's referred to here as a young man here in a minute. And so likely that he's probably maybe 12, 13, early teenage years maybe at the most. And so, again, he goes to his uncle and tells him what he's heard. Verse 17 through 24, it says, "Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, 'Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him.' So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, 'Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you.' The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, 'What is it that you want to tell me?' He said, 'Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath to not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request.' The commander dismissed the young man with the warning, 'Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me.' Then he called two of the centurions and ordered them, 'Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix.'" So Paul's nephew goes to Paul, tells him what he's heard. Paul says him to the commander. Commander pulls him aside, hears about the ambush that they're wanting to take place here, and he foils their plan by sending Paul with, which is pretty incredible, this massive detail, right? 470 soldiers to Caesarea to stand, so he can stand on trial before Governor Felix. You know, you read that and it's just like, yeah, pretty sure that those 40 guys, even if they would have known about this moment that they're going to do in the middle of the night, or at least late at night, 9 o'clock, they would have had no shot at doing anything against 470 soldiers. And so to me, there's a lesson here as well that we probably, I would say, tend to overlook. And that's this. Sometimes God chooses to care for us, provide for us, protect us, even bless us through natural means. I don't want us to miss this. We just saw it here, right? Could God have said, "I'm going to send an angel and take out these 40 guys"? Absolutely. We've seen God do these things. Could God have just spoken a word or even thought about it and blinded all 40 of the guys, or 40 or more guys, and all of a sudden they're lost and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't get to overtake Paul? Absolutely. We've seen God do that kind of stuff in the past. God could do it. God could have given them all diarrhea if he wanted to, right? And it's like, oh, we can't do anything. Anything he wants to do, he can do. God, I don't know why. Sometimes my brain thinks of things I should just not say. But he could have done anything, right? He could have done anything, any way he wanted to make sure this doesn't happen. And those kind of moments would have been more supernatural ways to take care of things. But at the same time, we look at this, and it's not what he chose to do here. He just does it in the natural. Instead, he sends 470 soldiers to go with Paul and protect him. And we need to make sure that we are always looking for God in the natural ways, not only the supernatural ways. And there's actually a few reasons for that. And I know you guys are wondering, well, Pastor, why is that? So I'm thankful that you're wondering that, because I'm going to give you the answer to your question. Because if we don't recognize these moments, when God shows up in the natural in our lives, I'm telling you, at least three things are going to happen. The first one is this: we will miss out on giving him thanks and praise that he deserves for what happened. If we're constantly only really excited about the big, huge, supernatural stuff that God does, and we're not continually thankful just for the natural ways that he provides and takes care of us and loves us and blesses us, if we're not paying attention, we will miss out on these opportunities to give him the praise that he deserves. For instance, how many of us have praised God today? Maybe some of you did. I doubt everyone in here praised God today that you just were able to get out of bed and come to church. That's a blessing. You know, there are people that didn't get to do that today. There are people that can't do that. There are people that could never do that and will never be able to do that for the rest of their lives. Yet we, if we're here in this place, we were able to get up out of bed and go to church today. We were able to stand with other fellow Christ followers and worship the Lord today. We're able to open the Word of God and study it together today in a country that allows us to do that. There's other people that don't have that. But yet, those are just kind of natural things we don't really think about. And when we're not thinking properly, we don't give God the credit and the glory that he deserves. So it's dangerous when we're not thinking properly. It also can be this, if we don't recognize these moments, is that we will be tempted to think that we had something to do with it. Right? If we don't recognize that in the natural that God sometimes blesses us, when good things happen, sometimes when great things happen to us, there's a little bit of it's like, well, I'm pretty amazing. Like, I worked hard for that. I put in a lot of hours for that. So of course that equals this. Yeah, I'm successful, but you should see all the work that I put in to be successful. And we will take advantage of it. We will look at this as, look at what I did instead of what God has done. We've got to be careful that we see God works through the natural as well. And then the other thing is that if we're not careful, we'll say something stupid like, well, I guess I just got lucky. Right? Man, that was so lucky. I was lucky that happened, or I was lucky that didn't happen. And we all do that. I know when I was in junior high, I had a really bad habit for some reason of making those kind of statements. I would say something like, man, I was lucky that happened. I'm so lucky. I was so lucky that this didn't happen. And I would make those kind of comments. And my youth pastor at the time, I remember him saying, if you say lucky one more time, I'm going to knock you in the head. All right? He was a very compassionate pastor. And dealing with me in junior high, you had to knock me in the head, by the way. That's a whole nother story for another day. Anyway, I would make those he would say that to me, and he would say, Darren, it's not luck. Those are blessings. Don't ever wish away that as luck. You are missing an opportunity. You're missing the fact that is a blessing from God. You're not giving God the glory that he deserves. I don't want to use that word. You're just going to kind of let that go, right? You're just going to let that go as something that's just attributed to luck? No, these are blessings from God. So I had to work really hard to make sure I wasn't missing opportunities to give God praise and to see him working in my life, even in the simplest or most natural of ways. So be sure to always look for God in the natural ways, not just the supernatural ways. And when you see it, be sure to stop and praise him for it. Don't forget to do that. Let's back to our story. The commander's sending Paul to Governor Felix. Felix is a brand new character that we're going to be introduced to here in chapter 24, more of it. But we're going to read the letter first that this commander writes to him. Again, he's sending this letter with the soldiers, with Paul, because he doesn't want them to just show up in Caesarea and Felix will be like, oh, what's this all about, right? So there's a letter they'll hand to him, and this is the letter that is going to be written by the commander. It's starts verse 25. It says, he wrote a letter as follows. Claudius Lysias, so we find the name out right there. This is the commander's name, Claudius Lysias. To his excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they are about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he was a Roman citizen. That's a little shady on Claudius's part. If you know the whole story, he's kind of leaving out a whole lot there. But verse 28, I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to the Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. So the commander's having Paul move to Caesarea to protect Paul. he realizes, I got to get you out of Jerusalem. I think he also just doesn't want to deal with Paul anymore. This is a lot of work trying to protect this guy, help him not get killed. I'm going to send him up to Caesarea, and I'm going to let Governor Felix take care of this one. Maybe he can get some answers about all this crazy Jewish hatred towards Paul. Now, Caesarea is about 70 miles northwest from Jerusalem, so it's quite a haul up there on the coast of the Mediterranean. Beautiful place. It's also the headquarters of this region for the Roman Empire, so the governor obviously would have been stationed there. And so this is where he sends him. So the commander, Claudius Lysias, sends Paul there along with 470 soldiers to protect him along the way. We're going to read, though, that some of them end up turning back because they realize it's a bit overkill, y'all. We're halfway there. I don't think we need quite the detachment here to take this man the rest of the way. We'll see that here in these next verses. So verse 31 through 35. So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they left the cavalry. They let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear your case when your accusers get here. Then he ordered Paul to be kept under guard in Herod's palace. And so Paul arrived safely, handed off to Governor Felix, and now he's going to await these shady characters from Jerusalem to show up because they're going to, the commander's going to tell him, listen, here's what I did. I knew about your whole little plan. Sorry about your luck. He's already gone. You didn't get to exercise that plan. He's up in Caesarea. If you want to accuse him, you go up there and you stand before Governor Felix. And so Governor Felix is waiting for these men to show up as accusers. Let's keep reading. So now we're in chapter 24, verse 1. 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. So there's an official court now that is kind of convening here in Caesarea. The high priest, some of the elders arrive again. These are those few shady characters that have all been stirring up all the trouble along the way. And you'll notice they're also all lawyered up now, right? They've got their lawyer, they've got Tertullus. So it's like, okay, we're going to go with the best of the best. We're going to make sure that we make it happen this time. So they bring this lawyer with them, and they're ready to argue in front of the governor about what they think should happen to Paul. And I'm going to tell you, this lawyer, he is such a schmoozer. It's ridiculous, really. Listen to what he said. This is verses 2 through 4 of Acts chapter 2. When Paul was called in, Tertullus, that's the lawyer, presented his case before Felix. We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order to not weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. That's like, are you kidding me? Like, what? It's such a lawyer statement, right? It's like, such a brown noser. Let me just kind of throw out everything I can think of. It just makes you want to barf. You read that and you're like, dude, are you serious? Like, this is how you're going to start this thing off? I don't even know Tertullus, but I'm telling you, I would not trust this man any further than I can throw him. He's just making up all kinds of fluff so he can be on Governor Felix's good side before he says what he's going to say next. So now he's done with the sucking up. Here we go, verse 5. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect and even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. Of course, none of this is true, by the way. Verse 8, by examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about all these charges we are bringing against him. The other Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. When the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I gladly make any defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way. And the way, if you've been with us, is a reference to Christianity, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. So I want to pause for a second, because Paul has been given this defense of himself. He's doing his best here, and he's tried to make a few things clear. First of all, he wants them to know that my religious record is clear. He's like, I know what they just said, but I'm going to tell you right now, my religious record is clear. There's no law breaking. I'm a very religious man. I take it very seriously, and it's just a bunch of bull what they've just said to you, Felix. That's not true. I've not done any of these things wrong. They have no proof of it, by the way. Let them produce any kind of proof of any of these things they've said. They can't, because it didn't happen. So my religious record is clear. He says my civil behavior is blameless. He's like, there's no rioting. I've not been the person who has started any riots. I have not incited any riots. Now, they have. There's been riots with me involved, but it wasn't because I started them. It's because they went crazy because they didn't like me and they didn't like what I was preaching or teaching or what I was saying about Jesus as the Messiah. So he's like, but my civil behavior is blameless. I've never started a riot. And then he says, and if I were in fact this horrible person that they describe, where are all these accusers that should be here with these guys? I mean, if I've traveled all over the world and just stirred up trouble my whole life, like that's what I am, this is the person that I am. Felix, don't you think that there would be a whole lot of people here ready to badmouth me and be a part of what these guys are trying to do? Don't you think it's a little funny, Felix, that there's these guys, it's only these guys that have come from Jerusalem, and this is it? Yeah, it's because this whole thing is not true. And so I also want to point out, this is interesting to me, because I honestly feel bad for Paul here. What about Paul's defenders? You ever think about that? Like, where were the early apostles in this moment? Where are his friends and the thousands of people that this man has discipled? Where are the people to defend Paul and who he really is as a person? I genuinely feel for him here. And for those of you who've been through some difficult times, you know this to be true. You find out who your real friends are when you go through something difficult. You will always have friends when things are going well with you and you're fun to be around and, oh, you're amazing. Or if you can offer them something, they can get something from you. That you're always going to have friends around during those times. But you will find out who your true friends are when things are going very, very difficult for you and they're still around. So this has to be a very difficult time for Paul. He's all by himself. He's trying to defend himself. And of course, I'm not saying that he didn't have any friends there at all. I mean, there's some people around that appreciate him, but there's no record of anybody defending him. Nobody's standing up for Paul and trying to say, yeah, listen, Governor Felix, we are here on Paul's behalf as well to tell you he's not who these guys are trying to say that he is. So again, he's all by himself. Of course, he always has the Lord. And just as he had that personal moment with Jesus that we talked about, which again was probably why Jesus showed up, right? When he did, because he knew there were going to be moments like this where he was going to need encouragement to make it through moments like this. So I feel bad for Paul here, having to defend himself all alone after being such a blessing to thousands upon thousands of people throughout his entire life. And so it's kind of a crazy moment for him. We're going to keep reading. This is verse 20 and 21. This is still Paul talking. He says, or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin, unless it was this one thing that I shouted as I stood in their presence. It is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. Because it is truly the resurrection from the dead that distinguishes Christianity from all other world religions. This is really what it was all about. No other world religion makes the claim that their leader died and rose from the dead. Only Christianity. It's what makes Christianity so different. So I want you to be careful here. I want you to understand this. Not only was Paul, the big reason Paul was in so much trouble here was because he believed in this, was promoting this, and was behind this. I want us to make sure that we do not buy in this whole thing about all religions are the same. We just worship the same God in different ways. No, we don't. We worship the one true living God. And the reason that Christianity is different and distinct from all other world religions is because the premise upon which Christianity was built, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, which translates into our glorious resurrection from the dead as well. It's Paul who says, if Christ did not rise from the dead, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain. Because if you don't believe in the resurrection of Christ as the basis for everything else, then you're just part of some powerless religion. The fact is, because Christ conquered death, there is hope for all of us who believe in Jesus and the resurrection, that we too will one day conquer death and be with the Lord forevermore. But this is the reason Paul's on trial, the resurrection. They just don't want to believe it. They don't believe what Paul's saying about it here. We're going to keep reading verse 22 and 23. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, which you need to don't forget that part, right? Governor Felix obviously knows about Christianity. He's heard about it. He knows what they believe. He adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias, the commander, comes, he said, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom, permit his friends to take care of his needs. So Felix shows Paul a little bit of love here, puts him under what we would consider to be house arrest, so he can have friends visit him. Now, several days are going to go by, and then Felix is going to get his wife, and he's going to bring his wife before Paul. He's going to ask Paul to come before them, and honestly, he's going to ask him to talk about Jesus. Again, when we read that Felix was well acquainted with the way, and then we see this happening, it just seems to me like Felix is super interested in Christianity. Like, I kind of want to hear this guy. I kind of want to know a little bit more. I'm intrigued, and maybe his wife is intrigued as well, and that's why he brings her along. But maybe they're on the fence, right? Maybe they're in that, they just don't know yet. Maybe they're on the fence about becoming a Christ follower. He gets his wife, and he sends for Paul. This is Acts 24, verse 24a. It says, several days later, Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish. She, by the way, this is interesting to me. She's the daughter of Herod Agrippa I. So if you, we know this historically. So if you have been with us through the book of Acts, you remember in Acts chapter 12, Drusilla's daddy, Herod Agrippa I, he is the guy, remember that he was speaking and they're like, oh my goodness, this is the voice of a God, and they were worshiping him. And because he did not correct them, God killed him and worms ate him. Remember that guy? That's Drusilla's dad. And maybe even more interesting is Drusilla's daddy was the grandson of Herod the Great, the king that we read about in the Christmas story, who ordered the slaughter of all the baby boys in Jerusalem or in Bethlehem in an effort to destroy the Messiah. So Drusilla comes from a long line of people who have always been against the Lord. Not to mention, her and Felix have had more than a questionable past. So again, if you read historically about them, you'll find out that they were both married before. They end up leaving their spouses for each other so they could be together. So they divorce their spouses and come together. So Paul is probably more than aware of their past. I believe that's why he chooses to preach this sermon with these particular topics in mind. Paul knows what's going on here. He knows who they are. He knows his audience. We're going to read this starting in 24b through 27. It says, he sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ Jesus. As Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe. We can see another little insight into his heart, kind of person he was. So he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years has passed, understand how much time Paul is being stuck in this place for no reason. 2 years had passed. Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. But because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. So Paul's going to sit here for 2 years. Guys, this is incredible. So Paul's 3-point sermon to the governor and his wife is about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come. Paul never feared anybody. It would have been easy for Paul to this is a moment for Paul to preach one of those easy listening type sermons like, hey, this guy has the power to set me free. And he also has the power to kill me. So maybe I should err on the side of, let me just tell you how sweet Jesus is, right? And that's would have been tempting maybe for a lot of preachers and teachers and people in Paul's position in this moment in time. But he never feared anybody. It didn't matter who you were, how much power you had over him. He always preached the unadulterated gospel. And he starts with righteousness. But if you think about it, why would Paul start with righteousness? Well, it's really this reason that all of us should start with righteousness when we are presenting the gospel to anybody. Because we need to understand the human condition. The human condition is that we are all born into sin. None of us is right with God. None of us are righteous. Paul says in Romans 3:10, he says, there is no one righteous, no, not one. Isaiah, in his book, in chapter 64, he says that all our righteous acts are like filthy rags, which is the 100% PG version of that, because what that really is translated is minstrel rags. And so they're PG in it a little bit in the NIV and some other translations that you see this, that our righteousness are like filthy rags. It's disgusting. And it's our righteousness, which means our best day, your best moment, when you actually felt a little good about yourself. When you're kind of like, man, I did a pretty good thing today. I did okay. I'm kind of proud of myself. It's like filthy rags compared to the righteousness of God. And so when we understand our condition, things begin to change. So Paul starts with righteousness because it's a reality check. So we will be able to understand and remember our human condition. We are sinful, broken, messed up people. If we never understand our true human condition, we will never understand our need for a Savior. Do you understand how important this is in evangelism? How important this is when you are talking to someone else about the gospel message? If they don't understand their human condition, if they don't understand, they won't understand their need for a Savior. So what will they do? They will just begin to try to save themselves. They'll do good things. They'll give money to charity. I think I'm going to be fine. No, you're not going to be fine, because if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you're going to hell. Do you understand that your human condition? You need a Savior. You're not good enough. No matter how much money you gave away, no matter how many good things you did, no matter how many old ladies you walked across the street or put her groceries in her vehicle for her, none of that matters. That's all like filthy rags. Do you understand that without Jesus, you're going to hell? That's your condition. You need a Savior. Paul wanted to make that emphatically clear before Felix and Drusilla, just like we should make that emphatically clear in front of anyone that we talk to about the Lord and about the gospel message. So just like us, Paul knew Felix and Drusilla needed to understand this so they could know the truth and choose to do something about their sinful condition, which, of course, the only cure is placing our faith and trust in Jesus Christ alone and his substitutionary sacrifice for our sins. That is the only, make sure you hear me say that, the only way that we can be made right or righteous before God. And so Paul lays this out for them. And then he moves on from righteousness. He talks about self-control. Now, of all the things that Paul could choose to preach about here, why did he then choose to talk about self-control as one of them? I think it's probably because of self-control or the lack thereof is really what's behind about every sin, right? And not the way it kind of works. I mean, once we know what we're supposed to do, once we understand what God has called us to as Christ followers, what the do's and don'ts, the things that he deems as sin, things we're not supposed to be a part of, when we know all those things, it's really just a lack of self-control that causes us to sin. And I think the other reason Paul may have chosen this topic with Felix and Drusilla was due to their past. They had obviously lacked self-control in the past, chosen to sin when they left their spouses for one another. So self-control or the lack of it's devastating. It's the root of all kinds of sin. And that's why it's listed as one of the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians that we are to strive to produce in our lives is self-control. And Paul obviously laid that out for them as well, I'm sure. And so he preaches righteousness, self-control, and then he goes to the judgment to come. I mean, this is like, holy cow, Paul. Like there ain't no shame in his game. Like he's gonna if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna go out telling you the truth. And this is where Felix gets uncomfortable and afraid, and he makes Paul stop. Again, verse 25, as Paul talked about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. You can leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. So he lays out the gospel. Let me tell you about righteousness, Felix, Drusilla. Let me explain to you what self-control looks like. And now, guys, let me explain to you what's going to happen to you if you don't get right with God. And Felix panics, and he's scared because he's being convicted of his sin. He doesn't want to hear. He doesn't want to hear that he's a sinner, and if he doesn't change his ways and put his faith in Jesus, he's going to go to hell for all of eternity. So he does what so many people do, right? Instead of choosing to make God first in their life and change their ways, they choose to plug their ears and just run from conviction. You know what, Paul? Time out. Ooh, getting a little hot in here. I don't know that I can handle any more of this. You're hitting a little too close to home. You know what? Take a break, Paul. I'll call you when it's more convenient for me. I don't really want to hear any more of this. Felix obviously likes his life. He likes his way of living and doesn't want to deal with his own sin issues and humble himself and surrender to Jesus. So he sends Paul away, says, I'll send for you when it's a more convenient time. And so many people have this same idea that Felix had, which is, I got time. Because when you say to somebody like Paul, I'll call you back when it's convenient. I'll call you back when it's convenient. What you're relaying is, I got more time. How arrogant is it of us to think, I got tomorrow. I'm young. I got years to come. I'll wait and let me get through this season of whatever. And then what arrogance is that we are telling God, essentially, I know what tomorrow holds. You don't know what this afternoon holds. You don't know what an hour from now holds for you. And so, but people think about this way all the time. I got time. Maybe I will decide to follow Jesus in the future. But right now, and I'm sure this was in his mind, to do that, to do what Paul is saying, what he just laid out for us, it would mess up my life too much. It would ruin my fun. It would cost me too much. And this is the same thing that so many people do today. This is their same excuses. And many times for those people who wait, it does end up costing them. It actually ends up costing them everything. Because when they stand before God after rejecting his invitation to save them, they trade the rest of eternity in the most amazing place that they could ever imagine. They trade that for these 80, 90, 100 years of life that we get on this planet, this broken down place, full of sin. We trade that for eternity in heaven with the Lord in the most amazing, perfect place there ever will be. Spending it with the Lord forever, instead of living the way God's called them to live here on this earth. Church, there's no more convenient time to place your faith in Jesus than right now. And if you're listening to this sermon today and you feel a lot like Felix, right? Maybe you're a little uneasy or afraid. I would tell you it's probably because you're not right with God. That's what that feeling probably is. You're not right with God. So get right with God, and you don't need to be afraid. Because when we are right with God through faith in Jesus, we're going to get to pass from this death to life. There is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. It's beautiful. You don't need to leave here afraid of the judgment of God, because you can be free knowing that you are forgiven. And that judgment that was intended for you has been placed on Jesus so that you might be forgiven and right with God. I'm going to ask you today, what are you going to choose? What's your choice going to be? Are you going to run? Are you going to run? Or are you just going to decide that, you know what, I'm going to gamble a little bit there, and you know what, I'm not right with God. There's No, I'm definitely not right with God. I know that if I died today, I wouldn't be going to heaven. More than likely, if you make those kind of comments, then you're probably not. You're probably right. You're not right with God. You've got an opportunity. You got an opportunity right now to change all that. Or you can say, let me give it some time. Maybe tomorrow. How about this, Pastor? We'll talk about this a little bit later when it's a little more convenient. Right? Okay, Felix, I'm just letting you know right now, you may not get another opportunity. None of us get to predict that and how that's going to work. So you have a moment right now, just like Felix and Drusilla had, to say, you know what, I'm ready to surrender. The choice I'm going to make today is not to run anymore. I realize I have a need. I realize my human condition. I realize that I'm going to hell without Jesus. I have to have a Savior. And so I'm willing to surrender and lay my life down before him and live my life whatever way he's called me to live it, knowing that I'm never going to live it perfectly, but I'm going to do my best to follow what his word says. And I'm going to pick up my cross daily and follow him. I'm ready to do that. I want to walk out of here this morning. I want to walk out of here today with no fear of that coming judgment because I know that I'm right with God. You have that opportunity, and I'm going to pray, and then we're going to give an invitation, which is just a moment for us to respond to what we've heard today from God's word. And so let's pray, and then we'll do that.